Hey, welcome to The Perspective. Mike Sherbino here. I'm so glad you're with us on the program today. You've heard the expression, let's take a trip down memory lane. And that either can be a yawn, something boring, or it's going to bring back some memories that hopefully were very positive. I want to take you down memory lane for me. It was 19 years ago. I had just come through a very difficult season in a local church. I thought I had done everything right, but some people didn't agree with that. And as a result, I got involved in conflict, trying to help people to see the best way through, to follow sincerely after the Lord Jesus. But the experience was brutal. And both my wife and I were just kind of reeling from how unfortunate this whole thing had been. But at that point, we needed some healing. We needed to sort through our own stuff and what some would eventually call PTSD. Can't actually believe that I'm actually talking about it in this way. Well, we were invited to retreat, and the retreat was at a campground nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And as we drove to the retreat place, we had to drive through a place called Hope. And the name itself almost seemed to laugh mockingly at me. Was there hope? Could we resolve this? What was I going to learn? And how would I work through forgiving people that had hurt me so much? Well, one of the facilitators that day, who has become a dear friend, he's been on the program before, was a man who, by the name of, and still has the same name, Dr. John Radford. And I discovered that John had been used of God to be somewhat of an expert in helping people go through conflict and helping people discover what forgiveness really looks like. And recently I spoke to John and I said, would you come and do a program on handling conflict and then do a part 2 on forgiveness? And he's agreed to do that. And so let me welcome today to our program, Dr. John Radford. John, always good to see you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Really my pleasure. It truly is to be here. Thank you.
And I'm sure you remember those formative experiences at that camp. I believe the sessions were 5 days long. And I thought, how are we ever going to get through that? I mean, a half hour would have been enough for me at that point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
John, tell us how you got involved in helping people work through conflict.
Yeah, back in my country of birth, my home country in that way, South Africa, I started life as a psychologist, and then one of the things I kind of was doing on the side of my desk was a number of people that I'd met in the country. We started a multiracial mediation service, basically for labor management in the union area of the country. We started that, and that's how I got into conflict. And it kind of evolved from dealing with these very difficult disputes. And often those mediation services are linked to a government, but South Africa's government at that time was not seen to be really a legitimate by the majority of the people in the country. So we started it. And then I began to realize that we were dealing with the issues, Mike, the kind of the pieces on the table, but we weren't dealing with the things behind it, right? The real challenge of, in that case, it was apartheid in its difficult, really dark days. And so I moved from there. Well, I continued in the mediation, but I was invited in to try and help with the violence that was happening in my part of the country, near Durban, on the eastern side of South Africa. And it kind of evolved from there. I said, look, I don't know how to help in violence because I'm not trained in that, but let me try and find someone who could. And we found people in Africa and internationally to help us. And as we did that, they said, John, don't leave because you have the relationships and the contacts. And so I began to learn vicariously, not just about how to resolve the issues as it were on the table, but some of the deeper things in life. And that journey has been really a kind of a life journey for me, because it's not just the issues, it's the matters of the heart, right? What keeps us really losing hope. You mentioned Hope and the city, the little town of Hope in British Columbia, but yeah, just losing hope, Mike. It's a hard, in conflict, if we start to lose that hope, and it really is from our own point or from those we with or those that we're against, whatever's going on. That's a part of it. So part of conflict work is in fact helping the person's group community to find hope.
So let me jump in, John, because conflict has some common denominators, whether it's with me between an individual or if it's an organization or countries that are dealing with conflict. Am I correct in understanding that?
Yes, Mike. I mean, I kind of got into that, just quickly going back to that South African piece you asked me about. I got into that because I began to realize that conflict, even if it's a community or a civil war or an international war up to those kind of levels, it comes down to helping people in conflict. It comes down to persons, to individuals. And we know that now, but at the time, for example, working with Nelson Mandela and the Prime Minister, de Klerk at that time, it does come down to individuals. It comes down to individuals and their commitment to trying to find a way through whatever the conflict is, even when it's feeling pretty dark and pretty tough. And so got a chance to work even with Nelson Mandela while he was still on Robben Island, and then obviously as that evolved into conversations and tried to find a way through it. True, obviously that was a difficult, well-entrenched conflict.
Well, that's amazing, just even as you described that. And I'm thinking if God could use you in that way, I know he's going to use you on today's program to speak to our lives. But I'm going to give you a couple of rapid fire questions just so that we can accomplish some of the turf that needs to be covered. So talk to me about change and conflict. Is it inevitable that there's going to have to be change when you're dealing with a conflict?
Yes, in fact, so I see change and conflict as conflict really could be an opportunity in change. And so it's often linked to change or my struggle against change or whatever it might be. There was one of the psychologists of this last century and this one, William Bridges, he spoke about the difference between transition and change. And transition, he said, is like the personal journey of being in change. And so as I think about conflict, there's this personal journey, Mike, and if we can understand our own and others' journey and be curious about that in change. So there's the transition part. If we can understand that, then there's a greater chance we'll find a way through, both for ourselves as we let go sometimes. It's not always a letting go, but often it is a letting go of something, be able to move on to something more, something different. And so it's that struggle, which is the transition piece.
John, I'm intrigued. If you could put your finger on one or two standard causes of conflict, what would they be?
Yes, so a key thing in conflict is people feel under threat. And it's often the thing that's not thought about, Mike, in conflict pieces, but I feel that something's threatening me. So it even can be in a hopeful context, but something's seen as, well, this is not working, it's a threat. And the moment I experience threat, and it could be something that comes in from something that I'm involved in or something said to me, that threat from the external triggers often something internal to me. And so I say, when there's threats, for example, if a bear came into my office right now, I would be focused on that bear. There's the focus I would have. But when it goes to threat on the inside, it's like the bear's moved from my office into my head. And then it's a much more of a struggle. And so the struggle actually for us in any kind of conflict in which we are involved is that it's an internal thing. So the internal pieces that are tied to my experience in the past or whatever it is, that will add to, and so they talk about being triggered, that adds to whatever I'm experiencing around me. And so that piece becomes quite important.
Very interesting. Folks, you're listening to Dr. John Radford, and we're talking today about conflict. In a moment, we're going to come back after a short break and talk about conflict agility. What does that mean? And how can that shape how you're doing life? But in the midst of that, if at any time you'd like to talk to somebody, you're feeling conflict, you're feeling overwhelmed with life, I do want to invite you to call the number on your screen, 855-910-6297. There are people that are waiting to hear from you and to talk with you. And if you want, they will pray with you. You're watching The Perspective. My name is Mike Sherbino. I'm going to be back in just a moment with Dr. John Radford. I'm back right now with Dr. John Radford, and we're talking about conflict. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about forgiveness. Today, John, put your boxing gloves on. We're talking about conflict. And I've got something I want to throw at you. You've written down the critical shift from resolution to opportunity. You have a name for it, conflict agility. Now, my weakness is I always want to get things resolved really quick, just kind of like kiss and make up. Let's get on with life. But it doesn't work that way, does it?
Yeah, no, it's true, Mike. And we always have a desire to resolve something, to resolve conflict. But it's amazing. The majority of conflicts, which is so interesting, are never resolved. Right? They actually continue in some form. And think about that. Think about your families. Think about things that are important to you. In fact, some conflicts we actually want to enhance. For example, holding myself to account to achieve something, holding someone else to account to achieve something. That involves some conflict, but actually you want to sustain that because the energy of that can produce change. So talk about it. So conflict resolution is important, Mike, but we also need to consider that sometimes we need to hold the tension of the conflict. And one of the ways I think about peace, and in the Bible, it refers to the peace of God, which passes all of our understanding. That peace, my understanding of that is that it's not a lack of tension. It's not that there's no tension. It's the ability to hold the tension. And think about it. This is how Jesus did it. To hold the tension with purpose or a direction.
So how do you do that? When you say you hold the tension, I got to admit, it's causing me tension.
Right. Yeah. So part of it is to recognize. So I actually see it as three parts. The first part, and I often use my finger like this. My first part is my little finger, is to go in, to actually go in to hold the tension within me. So too often when we're faced with conflict situation, it triggers a fight within me. I need to change. I need to do something. I need to act on this. And that's a very normal thing because our brain functionality has moved it from what we're using right now, which is our neocortex, back to our amygdala, which is the back part of my brain here. And that amygdala is an amazing part of us. It's our more primitive but very successful brain that gets us to focus on something. And what we need to do is just pause and go in. And the go in is not to fight myself to say, John, you need to change this, you need to do something. It's actually to acknowledge that I'm actually going to struggle. So it's to embrace my inner conflict, to embrace what's happening for me on the inside. And so that's the first step in this conflict agility, Mike.
That's very interesting. So I need to first understand that I actually am in a conflict as opposed to just being riled up or frustrated or angry. I'm hearing, if I'm hearing you correctly, there's a next step. And you talk about using systems to engage conflict.
Yeah.
What are the systems? Explain that to me.
So it is what we call systems thinking. So if I can go in and just embrace that conflict, then the second step, I use my thumb. So I've gone in, now I use my thumb to go up. in that second step of going up, I'm thinking about myself in context. So I'm actually seeing myself in whatever I'm involved in. If it's a conflict with another person, it might be in a group or community, whatever the context is. And that is systems thinking. So systems thinking is, I want us to think not like of an IT system or computer system, but think about it as more an ecological system, the way our whole ecology works, how there's relationships between elements of this world around us that ultimately make it work or not work in particular areas. So as we think about ourselves in that conflict, think about I'm in this conflict and I'm seeing myself in it, but I'm also seeing what's going on. So there might be the issues, there might be the persons, there might be whatever it is there. So that's the second part that I go in. So I'm not fighting myself, I'm going up and I'm seeing myself in the context of what's going on. So that's really the systems piece.
That is very helpful. Just as I'm trying to process it through. So how does that work though, if the conflict is between more than one person? Let's say 3 or 4, maybe. I know you've often worked with families who've owned businesses and there's been conflict, even in the transition of assets or power. So how does that work in that scenario?
So what happens when there's that complexity of more than one person or even multiple issues or whatever it might be? And what's happening, Mike, in our world around us, particularly with all the information we get and so many sources, our world, literally from young children all the way through to as we age, is getting more complex. Part of it, that systems thinking, is I'm doing that because we want to identify our pain points, where the problem is. It might be literally something that you're feeling, oh man, this is not working, or others are, or together, this particular component is not working, this is delayed, there's a problem, whatever it might be. To identify those pain points, and then secondly, we go to what I call the leverage points. And it's sometimes so too often we see a problem point and we want to work on that. A leverage point is not necessarily where the problem point is. And if you want to, we can go to Jesus remember when the situation where this woman had committed some adultery, and they were saying, Jesus, what would you do here now? Because they were going to kill her literally in terms of that era. So the pain point was clearly this woman in crisis, and Jesus resolved that conflict, but he also induced another conflict. Because remember what he said is he paused, he went down to the sand, and he drew in the sand. We don't know what he drew. He stood up and he said to those who were accusing her, he said, those of you who have sinned, those of you who have not sinned, throw the first stone. And they said they kind of slinked away one by one. So he actually moved that conflict from the event there to the very personal. So the leverage there was their own change, their own grappling with what's going on inside of them.
Fascinating. John, we have 1 minute left. I want to ask you final point because, and this could take an hour, but we don't have that time. Sure. Conflict causes pain. You talk about leverage points to alleviate some of the pain. Can you enlarge on that ever so briefly?
Yes, sure. So leverage point is a point of action where it's if we act on that piece, then it's actually going to help us in whatever else is going on. So sometimes, for example, the example I just gave you, Jesus saw the leverage point there as not just preventing that conflict, but actually saying, taking it to the heart of the matter, taking it to what's the issue that if that's what they worked on, it would change the way they think about tomorrow, the way they think about themselves in relation to tomorrow. So if we go back to the hope where we started, Mike, that's a new hope. That's a deeply found hope that God would have us make the changes. So conflicts are great, going back to change and transition. It's a great way of changing my life from the inside out, from my heartfelt to you. And as I do that, I will actually see you differently and become more curious. So one of the indicators that I'm on a leverage point is I'm more curious. I become interested about what's going on for my wife, for my child, for the situation we're in.
So helpful, John. Looking forward to tomorrow as we're going to be focusing on the whole subject of forgiveness. How we take the conflict, can we resolve it is going to be one of the questions, and what does forgiveness actually look like? People, you're watching The Perspective. My name is Mike Sherbino, and at any time, you're always welcome to call our prayer line, 855-910-6297. I want you to be reminded that you are loved by God, that He cares for you. Don't feel that you're alone. You can reach out and call us right now. We'll be right back in a moment. Here's the question. What are you going to do with Jesus? What are you going to do with the claim that He is the Son of God? And what are you going to do about the fact that He is calling you and I to decide if we are going to follow Him? We come to the Gospel of Mark today, and that's exactly what the early disciples had to process in their mind. What are we going to do with this man who is claiming to be the God of the universe? What are we going to do with this man who claims to be the Messiah? And we see the powerful encounter that they had with Jesus. And when you have an encounter with Jesus, you have to change. Things do not stay the same. I'm going to explain in a moment, but let's jump in and read from Mark 1, verses 16 to 20. It says, passing along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea because they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men. And we heard that phrase before, but now look at the implications. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were in their boat mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him. Okay. Where do we take it from here? Friends, Jesus always calls us to something greater. And in an amazing spin on words, he spoke to an educated group of redneck fishermen, and he invited them to participate in the adventure of a lifetime in becoming fishers of men. These were the initial men who would be the ones of whom others said, they are turning the world upside down. Jesus is still inviting men and women to follow him and to turn the world upside down. And how do we righten the world? By being his presence, by bringing Jesus' solution to conflict, that there can be forgiveness, as we heard with Dr. John Radford today. But greater than that is the question that you and I need to process. Where is it that I'm to follow him? He says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Well, for these first disciples, it meant to follow Jesus down a path of reckless abandonment. It was a path of saying, Lord, we'll give up everything that you ask so that nothing will hinder us from obeying you. Did you note when I read the passage how they left their nets and they followed him? The one group even left their father and the hired servants. And in doing so, they were saying that people and things that we profess to love the most, Jesus, they will be second to you. Something happens when we say yes to Jesus. There is a freedom that comes when we relinquish our hold on all that is temporary. Towards the end of the summer, I saw some young boys jumping off a high rock into the water. They looked first with trepidation at the long way down, but only when they jumped did they experience the thrill of that moment. And in jumping, they trusted the water to buoy them up and keep them from injury. You might be at a crossroads today where Jesus is saying, follow me, take the next step. jump into my waiting arms. And in inviting these men to follow him, Jesus would show them that his Father could be trusted. And as they lived in obedience to him, you're hearing this, that they would discover and live out the purpose for which God had created them. And the invitation is still there for you and I to follow him and to be fishers of men. So what does that mean for me? I think somehow if I'm to frame a prayer, it would be like this. Lord Jesus, as I live today, give me the faith and desire to say yes to your invitation to follow you and be a fisher of men.
1 in 5 Canadians struggle with a mental illness. Hi, my name is Alan Gallant, and I'm the Executive Director of Agora Network Ministries, a ministry that my wife and I founded based on my own crisis. Our ministry is to help anyone that's struggling with the mental health. We target the church and the believer in Jesus, and our aim is to help you move forward in your mental wellness.
I keep running in my mind those words of Jesus when he said, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. It really is the adventure of a lifetime. And that's the adventure that I'm asking you to come on with me, to be followers of Jesus. I'm so glad that many years ago I said yes. I had no idea where it would lead me and where it would take me, but I have no regrets. Have there been hard times? Sure. Difficult times? Yes. Have I had to deal with conflict? Ongoing. But I have lived with the knowledge of knowing that Jesus is with me and he wants to be with you. If you're prepared to be a follower of him today, just open up your heart to him and say the simple prayer, Lord, I am admitting that I'm a sinner. I'm admitting that I need you to be the leader and Lord of my life. I'm admitting that I believe that you died on the cross and you rose again to pay the price for my sin. And I am saying yes to you today. Be my Savior and Lord. If you said yes today, would you write me right now? prayer@theperspective.tv or call the number that's on your screen right now.